So you hear this all the time, right? China and Iran, they're brothers taking on the West. But what if I told you that whole idea, that brotherhood, is pretty much a myth? Yeah, let's dig into that.
Okay, so things are getting pretty tense in the Middle East. And the big question on everyone's mind is this. Is China going to step in and help its supposed brother, Iran? I mean, the answer here could literally change, well, everything.
But before we can even get to what China might do, we have to talk about that brotherhood. We need to take a really close look at whether it even exists in the first place.
You know, from the outside looking in, they seem like a perfect match, right? Both standing up to the West. But when you actually look at China's official playbook, well, it tells a very, very different story.
Okay, so in geopolitics, the absolute top-tier, most serious kind of alliance is what's called a military mutual assistance treaty. It's basically a you get attacked, I fight with you kind of deal, a real life or death pact. And get this, China only has one of these treaties in the whole world.
So who is it? You might guess Russia, right? Nope. And it's for sure not Iran. The only country China is legally obligated to go to war for is North Korea. I mean, just let that sink in. That one fact kind of changes the whole picture. There is absolutely no official duty for China to defend Iran. None.
And you know what? It gets even wilder. Because China literally has a tier list for its international partners, like a video game ranking. So let's see where Iran actually falls on this list.
So just look at this hierarchy. Tier 1, the ride or die pact, that's North Korea. Tier 2, you've got your all-weather best friends like Pakistan. And where's Iran? You got to go all the way down to Tier 5. They're literally in the same category as Italy and Australia. I mean, come on. That's not a brother. That's barely a friend you'd invite to a party.
All right, so no official treaty. But what about just, being friends? Surely that has to count for something. Well, if you look at their history together, friendship isn't really the right word. A history of betrayal is probably more accurate.
I mean, just check this out. In 2014, Iran leaks data to the US that gets a top Huawei exec arrested. Okay, then just a few years later, they do it again to another Chinese tech company, ZTE. They even took a bunch of Chinese cash to build a super important port. And then, what did they do? They turned around and gave control of it to India, one of China's biggest rivals. It's just one thing after another. Iran has consistently put its own needs first, even if it means backstabbing its so-called friends.
And hey, this isn't a one-way street. The feeling is pretty much mutual. A common way people in Iran describe China? A selfish oil merchant. So yeah, this is not a relationship built on trust or shared values. It is 100% transactional.
Okay, so right now you're probably thinking this is a no-brainer. Don't help them, right? I mean, why would you ever stick your neck out for a partner like that? But, and this is a huge but, here's where it gets really tricky. China's kind of stuck. They're way more tangled up with Iran than they want to be.
Just look at this first number, 90%. That is the massive slice of Iran's sanctioned oil that now goes to, you guessed it, China. Pretty much nobody else is buying, so China has become Iran's only real economic lifeline.
Now, look at it from China's side. 13% of all the oil China imports comes from Iran. Now you might think, 13% isn't that much. But here's the kicker. They get that oil at a huge discount. That makes it incredibly important for keeping their economy running.
But this next one, this is the one that really keeps strategists in Beijing up at night. 50%. Half. Half of all the oil China imports from the Middle East has to sail through the Strait of Hormuz. And who sits right on that critical choke point with the power to close it? Iran.
So you see the problem, right? The bottom line is, if Iran's current government falls, it would be a complete and utter disaster for China. We're talking about a threat to their energy security, a major blow to their dream of making the yuan a global currency, a huge wrench in their Belt and Road Initiative, and frankly, a huge hit to their credibility. I mean, what kind of superpower can't even protect its key suppliers?
So there you have it. China is caught between a rock and a hard place. They really don't want to help a partner who's proven to be unreliable, but they feel like they absolutely can't afford to let them fail. So that leads us to the final and maybe most important question. Putting all that aside, could they even intervene if they wanted to?
And the answer, if we're being honest, is probably no. The harsh reality is that a direct war with the United States is a line China is just not willing to cross. Not right now. Their military hasn't really been tested in a major conflict, and their economy is, let's just say, fragile. The risk is just way, way too high.
You know, you can actually break this whole complicated mess down into a really simple human-level decision. There's a famous legal case in China that kind of created a framework for this. It gives you 3 basic questions to ask yourself before helping a friend who's in serious trouble. First, are they a person of good character? Well, for China, the answer is no. Iran has a long history of betrayal. Second, is the friendship deep and genuine? Again, no. It's totally an alliance of convenience. And the final, most important question, is the problem manageable? Can you actually handle it? For China, that's a hard no. It risks a potentially devastating war with America.
When you look at it that way, the verdict is crystal clear. You don't risk everything for an unreliable friend over a problem that's way too big for you to handle. So all that noise you hear from Beijing, all the tough talk with very little action, that's not them being weak. It's a cold, calculated decision. They're simply not going to bet the farm on a bad hand.
And all this leaves us with one last big question to think about. In a world that feels more and more transactional, where alliances are often about what's convenient rather than what's right, what's the true price of loyalty? What's the cost of stepping in to help a friend? And maybe more importantly, what's the cost of just standing by and watching?